Welcome to Podcast with Smart, brought to you by Start with Smart. I'm Shayna, your host, and I'm joined by company owners Scott Simpson and Scott Dunn. Join us as we uncover the world of smart home automation and security. Whether you're a homeowner or a business, Podcast with Smart has the tips and trends you need to make your homes and businesses smarter and safer. Let's get to it, shall we? Back again for episode 3. How are you guys doing?
Very well, thank you very much. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you.
Good.
Thanks for asking.
I'm all right.
Yeah.
Good. Thanks for joining in there, Dunn.
So,
Just waiting for me spot.
this episode we're going to give our listeners a bit of a guide for how to choose the right CCTV intruder alarms for them. So when choosing a diamond ring, there are 4 things that need to be taken into consideration. Those are cut, colour, clarity and carat. How can we use something like this to apply to security solutions?
That is quite a good analogy, in that there are sort of several different factors you would take into consideration when you're choosing security systems. We have 3 Fs, don't we? So it's form, function and financial impact.
So isn't a camera just a camera and an intruder alarm just an intruder alarm?
In essence, I think it is. Yeah, fair to say. I think there's a lot of detail between different types of cameras and different types of intruder alarms. If you get super geeky about it, there's quite a lot of differences there actually.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, all said and done, CCTV cameras provide you with visibility and give you sight on something that's happening, and intruder alarms are going to make a lot of racket when someone intrudes into a space that you don't want them to.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword. Fundamentally, they all do the same job. It's the nuances around the additional features and functions, I suppose, that's where the differences mainly come in. It's what else it does on top of that is where the difference lies.
So why is choosing the right system so important?
Well, I think there's a few different things really. It depends on the application of the system and where the system's going to be and what you want to get from it. So there's sort of differences to consider when you think about a system for a home, perhaps. When there's a lot of other considerations you might make for a business environment. So it's really important to make sure you get it right for its application. Otherwise, essentially, it could just be useless.
And what's the difference between something DIY like a Ring camera and a professionally installed system?
Well, for the most part, for the basic functions, not a great deal. You get a picture, like we said. It provides you with what you want. They're quite cheap, they're quite easily accessible. But I suppose where the difference lies is having the functions over and above that and making sure that it's in the right place and having the right environment around it to make sure that your investment's maximised.
I think when anyone spends on that sort of anything that's sort of considered a considered purchase, so anything above, a couple of £100 or whatever, each their own in that sense. But I think people like to know that they're making sensible decisions with their investments, and I think getting the details right, consider with the application in mind, is really where you get that sort of feeling that you've made a sensible choice. I think, as I say, with like DIY systems, it can be a really easy, good choice for somebody who just wants one camera, just to go and buy something off the shelf and download the manufacturer's app, do the setup steps, and sort of take you through how to install the camera and where to position it and stuff. And all said and done, that's going to be a really low cost solution for somebody. And if their needs are just to monitor maybe the activity at their front door or the car on the drive, then I would say that's a sensible investment. I would say it's money well spent. Perhaps if they paid for a professional company that was accredited, and they paid somebody else to install that, then you could argue that they've overspent really for what they need. Where you can flip that on its head as well, and you could put a DIY system in what sort of leans towards a professional sort of system. You could put a DIY system in place, and you just wouldn't get out of it what you need. And all said and done, you'd spend a little bit less, but you wouldn't get the coverage and the security that you require. So
taking our 3 Fs into consideration, so form, design, quality, that kind of thing, function, is it wired, is it remote monitoring, and then finance, obviously what's your budget. let's look at a few different scenarios. So scenario 1, we have a farmer with 6 acres of land and livestock that needs monitoring. They just need cameras. What would you suggest for this person?
Over to the tech man.
Yeah, so we have a lot of inquiries for farms, and we work with a fair few. We certainly see an element of what I would call a higher end DIY thing that does happen in and around farms, but it never stands the test of time. There are cameras available that sort of have a 4G SIM card in them, and they'll connect using that, which has a monthly fee attached to it, and that will sort of serve a bit of a purpose. But the cameras themselves, they don't last 12 months. They're sort of like they don't stand the test of time. They're built to a budget, and the quality of it reflects that. We tend to go with a more robust approach with PTZ cameras. So we use an infrastructure. We're using a wireless network link to establish a connection to their internet that they're already paying for. From there, we can facilitate using a professional PTZ camera, so they can move it around. They can follow the livestock around the fields and actually be quite reactive in how they're looking around. They don't need as many cameras because they can use that one to cover a large area, and all being well, it's a robust sort of solution that will stand the test of time. So it's a pretty good investment for a farmer. It also allows us to use the network to expand on from there, so it has it can grow. The system can grow with them, and with it being internet based, they can use their Wi-Fi on it and expand on it that way too.
And so PTZ is pan, tilt and zoom.
Yes.
So having the control over it covers a wider area, essentially. In case they didn't know, thought let them know.
A worthwhile detail there.
Did I miss that?
Yeah.
You did, yeah.
Silly me.
Got lost in the world
Got
of
it on the
tech.
first head.
Yapping again. Right.
So scenario 2, we have a small independent gallery that needs CCTV and an intruder alarm. As a small business, they want to keep the cost down, but because of the high value of the goods inside the gallery, they want to make sure it's secure. They also want something discreet so that it fits the aesthetics of the gallery, and loss prevention is incredibly important. Ideally, they want a police response should someone break in. How could we help here?
I think first thing to consider is the fact that it's obviously high value goods, which means we want a professional type system. DIY systems aren't going to satisfy the criteria there, especially when you think about insurance requirements, and these DIY systems can't actually be connected to police response. The police response service stipulates that they need a graded system installed and maintained by an accredited company. So straight away they need a professional company. A couple of things stand out for me in the requirements there. The aesthetics of in choice of products. Well, some of the professional products we work with, they have a small but ample enough range of colours available. Things like PIR detectors for the alarm and the door contacts can be anthracite grey, they can be brown, or they can be white. Same with cameras as well. We've got grey, white, black cameras available to us. So aesthetically, we've got a few options there. Should help to sort of blend this sort of technology into the environment, which is a plus. And then on the cost side, although professional sounds expensive, it doesn't have to be. A lot of the manufacturers spend quite a lot of time and resources on sort of engineering these products down to a point where they're really affordable. So we don't have to pick the best products on the market with the 4K picture qualities and all singing and all dancing. We can put something in that's pretty reserved, give you a good enough picture quality and enough detection devices on the alarm to do a job without sort of going overkill on that. So definitely something that we could solve.
Yeah, for sure. There's, as you mentioned with the accreditation, there's certain stipulations in the design to consider that sort of go a little bit over and above what you would possibly think if you were to look at it from a DIY perspective, but all said and done, that generally tends to be a pretty sort of straightforward process for the most part, and allows us to be quite efficient with sort of product choice and cost across the board.
And so what accreditations should people be looking for And how do they find out if people are accredited?
So there are two governing bodies in the security industry. There is the SSAIB, of which we are a member, and there is the NSI. Now, both of these governing bodies, they come out and they check on all of the companies every sort of 12 months, and it's even more frequent than that for fire alarms. And they check that we're doing everything from our paperwork through to our maintenance and our installs. It's all gone through the fine-tooth comb to make sure that it's done properly and that we're not overlooking anything. And if we are overlooking anything, they correct us and help us take positive steps to improve every time they come out. So there's always something to be learned from their visits. But they also have a register of all of the companies that they have on their system, so it's quite easy to look up in your local area a company or a professional around you that can offer you some sort of constructive advice and offer a service that's going to meet your needs. In and around where we are, there's a pretty big handful of other guys that do what we do. And we know a few of them, don't we? They're all nice enough chaps.
Yeah.
It's very easy to find the right advice.
It's always worth checking, isn't it?
Yeah.
Always worth checking. Yeah. It takes a few minutes to go onto the website and have a look for these companies. And if the company you're talking with, if they're listed on there, then realistically that's quite far towards being assured that the system you're going to get is to the relevant standard. Always worth doing. These audits are quite intensive, aren't they?
Intensive, yeah.
Picking up on what you said earlier about how they sort of audit us and give us feedback on a yearly basis. Well, that's because the British standard is constantly referenced by the accrediting bodies like the SSIB and NSI, and they're always reviewing the standards that they enforce on us, and they sit between us and the British standard. They're always reviewing their standards based on the technology that's coming through, how that's changing. Like these systems can be connected to the internet now, which means that the criteria on companies like us over the last 5 years changed quite a lot, and it's quite difficult for anybody to stay on top of that. And these accrediting bodies actually do a really good job of coming on site with us once a year, and they take the time to go through it, and they give us all the guidance we need, and it keeps us sort of A game, really, doesn't it?
Yeah. So. Yeah, they're always putting out bulletins that we sort of file and read and make positive steps towards change, because if you're not in front of it, you're behind it.
Technology changes fast, doesn't it, out there? Yeah, more so now than ever. So
we'll go to scenario 3, which is a domestic case. We have an elderly lady, let's call her Beryl. She lives alone. Her independence is really important to her, but she's prone to falls. Her daughter lives 4 towns away and wants some peace of mind and to be able to remotely monitor the Beryl's safety. And we want it to be easy to use so that, as well as her daughter, Beryl can keep an eye on things if she's away from home. How could we combat this one?
A combination of products, really.
There are, yes, and not all of them are ones we need to provide per se. I think there's a plethora of DIY products available that would suit that. There's also a plethora of, shall we say, the more budget-friendly sort of professional systems as well, aren't there? That provide a pretty good entry-level product that meet a lot of the criteria that Beryl would need. CCTV, again, ring cameras and stuff like that. They're quite quick, easy to access and put up. The app can be given to a number of family members and Beryl to monitor her and herself and keep an eye on her. In terms of intruder alarm systems, there's also quite a few sort of DIY ones that would be suitable to just fit quite quickly and set up it for things like at night time and stuff like that. All of these apps are all pretty good. Where we come into that is we offer systems that have got a little bit more to them, haven't we? We've got a little bit of extra features to play with, such as more advanced motion detection and things like panic alarm systems that we can add to it as a supplementary thing to keep Beryl sort of safe and alert if there is a problem. But yeah, there's it's definitely not something that you would necessarily need to be an accredited system, it can definitely be a DIY option. It would just depend on sort of how elaborate that system would need to be.
Yeah, for sure. I think we get really excited and carried away about all this new tech that has come through our industry in the last, because we've been in the industry or in and around the industry for 15 years now each. We're 15, 16 years we first started out, and back then you didn't have all these applications and all these smart notifications and CCTV systems, for example, were very sort of closed. You didn't have access to them on your phones or anything like that, and we've seen it absolutely skyrocket to the level which it's at now, and we get very, very excited by all these features and functions. But ultimately, when we deploy a system for someone who's a bit older, we need to be a bit more simplistic with the way we think about these things, and something quite simple as a keyring fob for the alarm, where you hold it up to the keypad to set and unset your alarm rather than sort of dialing in on a smartphone goes a long way for people that aren't so tech savvy. Things with like CCTV systems plugging in their recorder to their TV, so they can just flick the channel, change the channel on their TV, and they can visibly see the CCTV around the perimeter of their home. So it keeps it really simple and accessible. So most of what we do is all the exciting techie features, but when we get an inquiry like that, it's very, very conscious of being accommodating as possible to the individual that sort of needs the solution.
Nice. Finally, let's look at a big business in a large office environment. So let's say they're a law firm, so they don't have anything technically of value apart from some computers, but there is lots of important, very sensitive data that needs to be protected. They've got an on-site security guard who can monitor CCTV feeds, and money for them is no issue because they're very successful.
Very well done.
Where would we start with the big business?
Well, I think we would start by passing this one over to our in-house tech engineer, Mr. Dunn.
Cop out. My immediate thoughts with that sort of stuff when it's not necessarily value is a bit of a curveball, actually. I know we're sort of talking CCTV and intruder alarms, but access control plays an important role in buildings like this. So if you can't get near the data, you can't steal it. So things like swipe card access systems and stuff like that are quite important. Where the alarms would come into that would be having systems broken down into zones. Quite often what we see in a larger building is they'll have areas that they'll have armed at all times, such as data rooms and stuff like that. They'll be sort of monitored 24/7 and only disarmed when somebody who's permitted to go in there is actually in there. They'll also have cameras. What we see quite often in rooms like that is if the light's left on all the time in some of these data rooms, which often it is, they'll have a camera that is a really good colour camera. If it's dark all the time, they'll have one that's fantastic with the infrareds, or they'll have something that's got what's called colour view built in, so it stays colour even in pitch black, and has like a supplementary light built on it. So there's plenty of different products for different applications in there.
For me, I like the that sort of cause and effect stuff around the access control.
There's a lot of that. Yeah,
I quite like the idea of having like you see it all the time in bigger buildings, but you have like a server room, or you have like a BMS room where you've got all the boiler and all the back end controls that's basically running the building. As you say, you don't want anybody in there and not knowing about it. No. So the solution is to leave that space armed, and then you can disarm that by having somebody with a relevant fob. You've probably seen them on the side of the walls in corporate buildings, right? They probably look about that big. They've got usually a little LED on them or something, and they're just to the one side of the door. And what that's doing is you put your fob up to it, and then that's releasing an electric magnet on top of the door, or maybe like an indoor release bolt, isn't it? That allows that door then to open. But a lot of the clever sort of geeky stuff that we like is the fact that fob can then, if that fob is a particular individual, say it's the maintenance man, that presentation of his fob at that door at that point can automatically disarm the alarm in that space. And then if somebody from accounts tried to get in the same room, not only would the door not allow them access into that room, but it also wouldn't disarm the alarm. And you can do all sorts of clever back-end programming between these sorts of systems. So it's really, I suppose it's like ease of management, really. I mean, imagine if, every time someone needed to go in there, that was allowed to go in there, had to go and get access, and trouble somebody for keys and disarming that part of the alarm every time they needed to go in. Over the course of a couple of years, that's going to mount up to quite a lot of time, really. All those little back-end programming nuances, we love it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I love stuff like that and just watching it work and playing with it. But in a big building, in a big place like that, where you've got a lot of people to manage and a lot of things to sort of deal with, especially from a GDR perspective, and it's quite easy to sort of put something like that in place and know that everything is doing its thing. Everything remains protected because there's fail-safes in place to make sure that nothing can or will go wrong.
A lot of these access systems as well now have that sort of really intuitive user management, don't they? Software where you can sort of like have a program running on a PC or a little plug-in card reader, and you can sort of change the access permittance per card individual quite easily at the touch of a button or a few sort of clicks on the PC software. Which again, it's that manageability, isn't it? So I think something like that for a law firm that's got a few really sensitive high stakes sort of areas to protect. I think a balance of some well thought out smart access control, CCTV in the right places, and an intruder alarm that functions as a cause and effect sort of as and when access is changed throughout the building. As you say, quite often it's only Christmas Day that the alarms in places like these are set mostly, isn't it? Especially if they've got manned security that are there 24/7. So yeah.
So keeping these sort of 4 scenarios in mind, and even adding a few more that you have in your head from projects past, what ones would you think would benefit more from a DIY situation, and what would benefit mostly from a professional install system?
I think undoubtedly there's a divide between domestic and commercial sort of DIY and professional systems. I think domestically, I think it's very feasible and reasonable, really, to say that 9 times out of 10, a quick purchase on somewhere like Amazon for a Ring camera is going to satisfy someone's concerns. Keeping an eye on their entrance and driveway sort of thing. Yeah. So I think DIY mostly applicable to domestic, and then anything commercial where the stakes are a bit higher, insurance requirement, police monitoring, assets, stock, all that sort of stuff. I think professional is definitely the way to go with these systems. Yeah.
Certainly domestically in the short term, I would add as well. A lot of these DIY site devices, they have a shelf life. Not just as a thing from build quality, but as we know from people like Apple and their persistence on releasing a new phone every year, that these things they upgrade them and they put software developments, and after a few years the thing that you have bought will be left behind, and you'll find yourself buying another one.
That's a very good point. I think it's probably important to say that the sort of balance of saying that DIY products are best for the home really only applies when you're thinking about 1 to 2 cameras. If you're thinking about a system sort of like 3 to 8 cameras for a home, so some homes we've put sort of 8 or more cameras in them, some large properties, then you don't get that cost efficiency with the DIY systems. And actually these DIY systems can be quite complicated to deploy because they rely on Wi-Fi. So I think, the advice definitely, as you say, some of the tech we put in professionally, even in domestic properties, we put in 10 years ago and they're still functioning now. And they've got a great set of features, even by today's standards. But also it does become more cost effective to have a professional home solution above and beyond sort of three cameras.
Yeah, certainly with monthly fees that a lot of these sort of DIY systems tend to carry, don't they? A lot of them have an ongoing running cost, whereas the more professional systems tend to be a sort of a high level initial investment, but it pays for itself over the amount of time that you actually get out of it.
I would say from experience, it's probably it'll probably cost maybe 30% more to have a professional system installed. But then, on a 3-4 camera system, that 30%, the amount of money is not massive, so that 30% doesn't actually in reality resemble a large amount of money.
No.
And then when you think about, like you say, the monthly cost of the storage in the cloud on the DIY systems, over time that's obviously gonna amount up, and you'll probably find you'll end up spending more on that DIY system over the course of its lifespan than what you would on a professional system because of the monthly fees. But the reason why the professional systems don't actually charge monthly fees for recording is because they're in the business of having the storage for the footage local to the device. So they'll have a hard drive that's located in the recorder that maybe has like 2 terabyte, 4 terabytes worth of capacity, which will give sort of 30 days of recording storage. So the idea is you're buying that drive once, and then it's doing that recording job for you free of charge thereafter. Whereas the DIY type providers, their business model is very much built around giving you those good features like recording and some of the other more advanced motion and AI stuff at a monthly fee.
Nice. So essentially what you're saying is it's not one size fits all.
Definitely not.
And to think about your 3 Fs.
Yep.
Which obviously are...
Which are?
What do you know?
One each.
Form, function, and finance.
Form, function, and finance.
Cheated.
Fraud.
If you are looking into getting some of these systems put in, and you're still a bit unsure, pick up the phone. We're more than happy to... Well, these guys are more than happy to help answer any questions. And then multiple other businesses around, especially if you're not in the southwest.
I actually think you're learning quite a lot about this, Shayna, so I think in time maybe you're going to be the person to be on the phone.
A few more podcasts.
Yeah.
You're on your own.
But yeah, pick up the phone, talk to an expert. But if you kind of know what you want, having an idea of what design you want, if you want it remote monitoring and you want to keep it low cost, having those things in mind really helps the installation team to assist you with creating what you want.
Yeah, given the right advice. I mean, I think that's what our aim is as a business, is not to install every system that's out there. Although I think Scott would quite like that title.
World domination.
You would like
We've
that
been
one.
through this.
Yeah. But I think, as long as we can say, all said and done at the end of the day that we've given our best advice, we're sort of happy. And I think any professional company out there should really be the same. So as you say, worth picking up the phone.
Do you have any final words of wisdom?
I have a bit of a bias, as I suppose most engineers do, towards the pro level equipment, because you sort of spend so long, removing the DIY equipment in favour of the more expensive stuff, and it really is, make sure you do your homework, because it's so disappointing when we come out to site and we find ourselves taking out 5 or 6 DIY cameras to replace them with 5 or 6 pro cameras, because they've made a mistake, they've not done their homework, and they've found themselves putting in money to a system and quite quickly realising it doesn't fit their needs. So yeah, it's homework.
Well, it's a lot of information out there, isn't
There
there?
is.
Yeah. If you spent like a couple of minutes now just googling like what camera should I have for my home, well, good luck, because there are so many blogs, there's so many sponsored adverts out there, so many like tech magazines that are doing sponsored articles, and there's bias left, right, and centre when you're online trying to figure out what these details are. And from you see one camera, and it's one camera, but you've got what lens quality, what picture quality, what night vision, what so the same with any of these things. There's a load of details in there. So as you say, take your time to do your homework, but in any case, always pick up the phone and try and speak to a professional company anyway before, even if you're almost mindset on DIY, just pick up the phone, because you never know what insights and information you'll get from a professional that's been working in the industry for years and years.
Awesome. I think we'll wrap there.
Yeah, that's all right.
Cheers,
Well done.
guys.
Thank
We'll
you.
see you again for episode 4. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Podcast for Smart. Don't forget to connect with us on social media for a closer look into the work we do. And if you're eager for more exciting podcast content, be sure to hit that follow or subscribe button. Stay smart and stay connected.